they organized 150 lectures with their limited resources at their home, but there was considerable enthusiasm and many people attended those lectures. We have tried to continue that tradition, so we have inherited that forum and we are trying to organize these lectures every month. Fortunately, while some of the other activities have been affected because of technology, Jigyasa is one forum which has continued its activities. And we are really, really delighted that you have kindly agreed to join this event and speak to us on a very, very important and relevant topic. I'll request our president to kindly formally introduce Mr. Varma and also request him to speak the topic. May I say, Pavan ji, that आप चाहें तो आप हिंदी में भी बोल सकते हैं, अंग्रेजी हिंदी हम दोनों पसंद करते हैं, राजस्थान के लोग हैं, और वैसे तो आप संस्कृत भाषा में भी बोल सकते हैं, लेकिन जैसा आप चाहें वो ठीक रहेगा. Either way, it's fine with us. May I request our President, Mr. Arun Kumar, to kindly now proceed with the event.
Thank you, Naren. Thank you. Friends, we have today with us a very eminent scholar, Shri Pavan Varma. It is a matter of great privilege for me to welcome him to Jigyasa, a forum of our association. Shri Varma started as a diplomat and was ambassador in several countries, including Bhutan. In 2012, he was conferred Bhutan's highest civilian award, Drup Thakse, by His Majesty the King of Bhutan. Shri Varma was director of the Nehru Center in London and was also Director General of ICCR. He was also the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs. The University of Indianapolis also conferred honorary doctoral degree on Shri Varma for his contributions to the fields of diplomacy, literature, culture, and aesthetics. Some time back, Shri Varma was member of the Rajya Sabha and was also advisor to the Chief Minister of Bihar. Shri Varma is a well-known figure in the literary world. He has authored over a dozen best-selling books on a variety of subjects, varying from Ghalib to Great Indian Middle Class, to Chanakya, to Adi Shankaracharya, and to Tulsidas' Ramcharitmanas. कुछ समय पूर्व मैंने भी वर्मा जी की पुस्तक द ग्रेटेस्ट ओड टू लॉर्ड राम तुलसीदास रामचरितमानस पढ़ी थी. तुलसीदास जी का रामचरितमानस तो एक महान ग्रंथ है और उसका कोई उपमा नहीं है. कभी कभी तो मुझको ये विश्वास नहीं होता कि ये किसी मानव की रचना है. उसमें से कुछ दोहे और कुछ चौपाइयों को छांटकर वर्मा जी ने अपनी पुस्तक में पूरे रामचरितमानस के निचोड़ को इतने सुंदर ढंग से प्रस्तुत किया है कि उसका मैं वर्णन नहीं कर सकता. बहुत उसके लिए मैं उनको साधुवाद देता हूँ. आपने वर्मा जी बहुत गजब का काम किया है रामचरितमानस का निचोड़ उसमें निकाल कर. Coming back to today's topic, I may mention that in 2018, Shri Varma was conferred an honorary doctorate by Shri Sharda Institute of Indian Management for his book, Adi Shankaracharya, Hinduism's Greatest Thinker. Shri Varma is an immensely popular speaker in the prestigious Jaipur Literature Festival. Today, he will be speaking to us on Adi Shankaracharya and relevance of his life and message in today's times. Thank you very much. Over to पवन जी, अब आपका माइक है।
Thank you so much, Arun Kumar ji. मुझे बेहद खुशी है कि मैं आज आपके सामने रूबरू हूँ जिज्ञासा के फोरम में with people far more eminent than I am, who have contributed all their life in the public realm. And I have a special fondness for Rajasthan. Not only do I come there every year for the Jaipur Literature Festival, but somehow the ethos and the ambience, the love, the affection my wife and I and family have received in Rajasthan, and we have toured it extensively by train, Palace on Wheels once, and by car, and many destinations, beautiful forts and resorts. So I'm happy that metaphorically I have been transported to Jaipur today or to Rajasthan, and I'm in your midst. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this forum. It's a great honor and privilege for me. Adi Shankaracharya, to my mind, represents the audacity of thought. Very often, and unfortunately so, we become indifferent to or suffer from an inexplicable amnesia with regard to our own past. Its manifestations can be ridiculous. When I was researching and writing Adi Shankaracharya, I met people who were otherwise extremely well informed, who did not know when he was born, what he wrote, what he stood for. ये अजब विडंबना है हमारे पढ़े लिखे तबके की कि लोग शेक्सपियर तो पढ़ लेते हैं, कालिदास नहीं पढ़ा है. So in a sense, we become adrift from our own cultural roots. I'm not making a case in any way for chauvinism or xenophobia. But I have always maintained that you have to be authentically rooted in your own cultural soil. It gives you, and I've been in the foreign service and I've seen the consequences of those who have not, serving abroad in London, New York, in Moscow. I realize how important it is to have some idea which is beyond the superficial of some of the great legacies of our past without straight jacketing them within a sense of insular superiority. It's important. Otherwise, we turn out to be well-educated, well-dressed photocopies, which is an unsustainable paradigm. So therefore, one of the things I did when I wrote Adi Shankaracharya was to actually travel on the route he took. At that time, it was a very busy period. I was National General Secretary of a political party, and I was a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha. But nevertheless, I found the time to go to Kaladi in Kerala, where he was born in 788 CE, what we used to earlier call AD. He lived for a very short period, only 32 years. Let me say his dates are contested by those who believe that he lived 3000 BC, that he never died, and so on and so forth. But if we move from wishful thinking and go back to the possible historicity of his life, the accepted date, whether it is Dr. S. Radhakrishnan or other scholars, is 788 to 820. So I went to Kalhati. I went to the house on the banks of the Purna river. I meditated there for a while. And then I went, because as a young child of 6 or 7, he left home and walked all the way to Omkareshwar. Omkareshwar, as you are perhaps aware, is a beautiful town on the Narbada in Madhya Pradesh. It is also the home to one of the Shivlings. And there, Shankaracharya had joined the hermitage of his first guru and perhaps only Guru Gaudapad. And he stayed there for 3-4 years. And from there, I then went to Kashi, which is where he went to. And on the banks of the Ganga, I was reminded of the great shastrarths that used to happen there, because Adi Shankaracharya finally established the validity of his point of view by discussion. And I will come to that subsequently in my lecture. And then I went to Badrinath and Kedarnath. And I also went to the 4 mutts which he established: Shringeri in the south, Dwarka in the west, Puri in the east, and Joshimath in the north. And as you will see, in the 8th century CE, this is the civilizational map of India. Although Winston Churchill once famously said that to say that India is a country is to say the equator is one. There is a tendency among both colonial historians and their followers even now to see India as only a random collation of diversities without a unifying thread. I think the fact that in the 8th century AD, Shankaracharya ji established the 4 mutts which encapsulated India put spade to the myth that the British created India. They may have created national boundaries, but as you know, even boundaries came up only after the treaties of Westphalia in the 17th century. So the civilizational unity of India, I was able to discover walking with Adi Shankaracharya. First and foremost, I want to speak a little about the audacity of his thought. As you know, he was a Shrutivadin. I mean, he believed that the Upanishads, which are one of the most amazing documents the world has seen, are revealed texts, and on that basis, his primary achievement was the development and elaboration of the Advait school of Hindu philosophy, which is also called Vedanta. I need hardly mention to you that typical of the internal diversity that Hinduism sustains, it's not an Abrahamic religion. There is no one God, no one Pope, no one only temple, no one only prescribed text, no one only mandated ritual. So within the diversity that Hinduism sustains, there were 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. The Sankhya, the Yoga, the Nyaya, the Vaisheshik, the Purv Mimamsa and the Uttar Mimamsa. And each of them, remarkably enough, were exceptionally profound attempts to try and understand who we are and how we can perhaps explain the bewildering complexity of this universe. It is interesting that almost all of them can technically be called atheist. Their search was not for God in the conventional sense. They were looking for ultimate truth. What could be the truth? So, except for the yoga school as part of the Sankhya Yoga system, which refers to the possibility of godhood, there is no mention of divinity. Can you imagine the audacity of thought? At a time when people created God, here was the evolution of Hindu thought in its formative stages, which began to explore the truth outside the temptations of finding conventional divinity. And so, Adi Shankaracharya, who was a votary of the Uttar Mimamsa school, also called Vedanta, also called Advait, which means non-dual, was a proponent of the seminal notion in the Upanishads of Brahm. It's an audacious concept. Think for a moment. In a forest near a habitation, some sages and seers withdraw from life and meditate upon what could be the truth. And amazingly enough, they come up with the notion of Brahm, an all-pervasive, pulsating cosmic consciousness, which is adrisht, beyond sight, achint, beyond thought, akhand, indivisible, anant, eternal. It is nirvishesh chinmatram, undifferentiated consciousness. It is sarva pratyay darshanin, supremely intelligent and all-knowing. And it is nirguna, beyond attributes. This conceptualization, and it's interesting, I don't have the time in this lecture, maybe I'll just refer to it in passing, but in my book on Adi Shankaracharya, I have a chapter called The Remarkable Validation of Science, which is not the Dinanath Batra school of Hinduism, whereby aeroplanes and internet existed in the past and Kunti conceived because of advanced in vitro fertilization and so on and so forth. It's not an attempt to ridicule by false exaltation the past. But I have written this after a deep study of what the scientists at the frontiers of research are saying. That ultimately the cosmos can only be explained if we conceive of an entity which is infinite, which is eternal, which is intelligent, which is unchanging, which is interconnected, which is indivisible, and which is pure consciousness. I would recommend to you, if any of you have the time, to see my book, and especially this chapter, because it's very cogently argued out how, whether it's Einstein or Schopenhauer or Schroeder, how they accept. And then Shankaracharya developed a further concept, which is also one of the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads, where he said that Brahm and Atma are the same. I am Atma Brahm. Aham Brahmashtami. In other words, the Nirguna pulsating consciousness of Brahm is within us also in the nature of the Atma, the soul within us, the Chitta. And the two are one, and the moment we realize this oneness, we are at the threshold of liberation. But it was preceded by an exceptionally analytical study of the mind. Adi Shankaracharya writes that the mind consists of three principal elements: buddhi, intellect; ahamkar, sense of I-ness, the ego; and chitta, that silent sakshi within us, like Brahm, unchanging, indivisible, the constant silent observer. The mind, buddhi, is permanently volatile. It's like a monkey jumping from one branch to the other, mostly preoccupied with sterile thoughts, one thought leading to another. You wake up at night, you have a thought, and that thought carries you along like a wild horse would drag a chariot. So there is buddhi and there is ahamkar, and Adi Shankaracharya, for purposes of brevity, said that when you are able to control the mind and become sthir pragya, and when you begin to see through this false sense of importance of the ego, automatically you reverse to being much more within the purview of the chitta within you. And you can observe it. The moment, whether in meditation or otherwise, if you have stilled your mind and the endless chain of thoughts, you will feel a sense of transcendence, of pure awareness, of joy and fulfillment. That chitta, aham brahmashtami. Then what is this world around us? What is it about? I don't have to explain these concepts in any detail. आप लोग तो सब मुझसे ज्ञानी हैं. But the whole notion of Maya today is based on quantum physics. What you see is not what is. What you think it is not. A particle is a wave is a particle, matter is energy, energy is matter. 97% of the universe is dark matter about which nobody knows anything. A body is just empty space with waves of energy. Quantum physics has revolutionized our way of looking at reality. And this is precisely what Adi Shankaracharya said. It is and it is not. What we see is, but it is not so in an ontological sense. जो अस्थाई है, जो जो अस्थाई है, जो अस्थिर है, that's the right word, जो अस्थिर है, unstable है, और जो परिवर्तनशील है, वो कभी भी सत्य नहीं हो सकता. That was the premise. So the reality exists, but it is not what it is. It comes into being and will decay and is perishable. Therefore, our mistake, and that is what the great illusion of Maya creates, is adhyash, an error of perception. Maya operates through avaran, masking, and vikshep, distortion. And then what is unreal, transient, transitory, unstable, passing appears to us to be permanent. And what is eternal within us is sidelined. So reality is and is not. It's like the famous parable of the serpent and the snake. So long as you think, the serpent and the rope, sorry. So long as you think the rope is a serpent, the serpent exists in your mind. The moment that error of perception is rectified, the serpent ceases to exist. So it is and is not. I don't have time, unfortunately. आप लोग के पास भी वक्त कम है और मेरे लिए भी इतने बड़े सब्जेक्ट पर कोई समेशन भी मैं नहीं दे सकता हूं. पर essential point is that there was a vigorous analysis of the mind and a vigorous analysis of reality. And on that basis, Adi Shankaracharya concluded that only Brahm, that Nirgun consciousness, is eternal and is also part of who we really are. Na punyam, na papam, na sokhyam, na dukkham, na mantro, na tirtham, na vedo, na yagna, aham bhojanam, naiva bhojyam, na bhokta, chidananda rupa shivoham, 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 shivoham. All that ultimately matters is the inferential experience of bliss and awareness that comes when we are one with that silent Sakshi within us, which is the same as that Brahm, which is also all cosmos pervasive. So that was the broad thesis. Now, what is the relevance? I will come briefly to this part to leave time for some questions and answers. What is the relevance? First of all, the relevance for post-colonized societies, where the threshold of intellectual achievement becomes often devalued. Dissertations and doctoral theses are written, largely plagiarized or bolstered by an excess of footnotes. In such a situation where we somehow have lost the umbilical cord to the maulic soch, the power of original thought that was essentially our legacy, this grandeur of thought reminds us of what our potential really was. and puts into the shade the derivative, mediocre work that is very often the output of even our universities. जो उनका काम था ये तो मौलिक था. It's original work, rigorous work, based on analysis, empirical observation, and deep insight. That is what we are capable of. Secondly, I have already mentioned this whole notion about nation and civilization. I am always a little suspect of nationalism. And as we know from our times today, nationalism's misuse into becoming hyper-nationalism and ultra-nationalism is a fairly easy progression, often the refuge of those who want to deflect attention from the real issues. But civilization is another ball game. Naturally, nationalism is something to be proud of. I'm proud to be an Indian. But I am equally proud to being an Indian with a civilizational construct that is verifiable and traceable to the dawn of time. And I don't say this, let me reiterate, with any sense of chauvinism. No. I have a new book I may share with you coming out in a couple of weeks called, it's a big book over 400 pages, called The Great Hindu Civilization, which pays tribute to this civilization and also challenges those who seek to appropriate it as their monopoly without enough knowledge of it. There were peaks of refinement. There was a continuity. There was diversity. There was assimilation. And the net construct of it was a civilization that was, in fact, that refused to become a museum relic and is Sanatan. अब उसकी रूपरेखा कोई बिगाड़ करके उसको केवल कुछ राजनीतिक लक्ष्यों से उसका इंटरप्रिटेशन करे तो वो अलग बात है, पर पहले समझिए तो कि क्या था. Adi Shankaracharya's relevance is that he demonstrates to you the possibility, relevance, and the verifiable existence of that grandeur of thought. Exceptionally relevant today, as an antidote to all forms of individual or collective mediocrity. Secondly, the very notion of Brahm is all unifying. अगर आप भी उसी ब्रह्म के पात्र हैं, मैं भी उसी ब्रह्म का पात्र हूं, और उसमें कोई डिफरेंशिएशन ही नहीं है, इट इज जस्ट attributeless pulsating consciousness. So all these man-made hierarchies के relevance क्या है? As Tulsidas says brilliantly, I've rarely found a line which is so brilliant in its brevity. Lakshman says to Ram, श्री राम, कि जरा मुझे माया समझाइए. तो तुलसीदास के शब्दों में श्री राम लक्ष्मण से कहते हैं, मैं अरु मोर तोर ते माया. मैं, मेरा और तेरा. यही माया है। पर अगर हम ये मान के चले कि आप में भी वही, आप भी वही हूं, मैं भी वही हूं, तो मैं और मोर तोड़ते माया कहां से आएगी? The third relevance is a more practical one, and that is about actual caste distinctions. I am not saying Adi Shankaracharya was a social reformer. He was a Brahmin. His primary pursuit was philosophy. But the unavoidable inference of his own thesis was that man-made caste hierarchies cannot be legitimate. So there is a famous story, part folklore, perhaps apocryphal, perhaps true, which has been passed down to us by some of his biographers, about Adi Shankaracharya meeting a Chandal, as they were called then, the outcasts, in Kashi, and people tried to clear the path for him, removing this defiling presence, quote unquote. And it is said that Adi Shankaracharya composed the Manish Panchakam. It's one of his stotras with only 5 shlokas. Panch stotra. The Manish Panchakam, where he stated bluntly in each of the shlokas, Chandalastu, Chandalastu Satu Dvajostu, Gururashya Manishamana. Whether you are a Chandal or you are a twice born, for me, you are a Guru. That is not what I think. That is my resolve, Manish Mama. Again, in the Nirvana Shatakam, among the beautiful stanzas, he says, Na mai mrityu shanka, na mai jati bheda. Na jati bhed nahi. Na mai mrityu shanka, na mai jati bheda, pita naiva mai naiva mata na janma. Na bandhur na mitram gurur naiva shishya chidananda rupa shivoham 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 shivoham. So, jati bhed. So, it's a lesson for us. So embroiled are we in the narrow citadels of which we believe to belong, and the collective national exclusion that nurtures. If we took the trouble of studying Adi Shankaracharya, it would be on the authority and text and the interpretation of our Shrutis by one of our most profound thinkers be rendered null and void, ab initio. So therefore, and a last thing of great relevance today, it's actually an endangered species. It's called dialogue. अब आजकल का माहौल ये है कि या तो मैं सही हूं या आप बिल्कुल गलत हैं. गालिब ने कहा है ना, बात पर वहां जुबान कटती है, वो कहें और सुना करे कोई, चाहे वो दिल की बात हो या मन की बात हो. Point is very simple. We are inherently a civilization of dialogue, Shastrarth. And let me demonstrate what is the lesson from Adi Shankaracharya. One of the most pivotal points of his life was his Shastrarth with Mandan Mishra. You're all aware of it. I don't have to expound. Mandan Mishra was the exponent of Purv Mimansh, which stands for Karma Kand. If you do the Vedic rituals as per the prescribed rules. That in itself is a path for salvation, whereas Adi Shankaracharya was a votary of the Gyan Marg. आपको मालूम है कई मार्ग हैं, भक्ति, कर्म, ज्ञान. अब ये दोनों दिग्गज स्कॉलर्स और आदि शंकराचार्य उनके घर जाते हैं और मंडन मिश्र उनको देख के बहुत प्रसन्न नहीं होते. He doesn't want to have too much to do with this proponent of the Gyan Marg, who was a critic of the Karma Kand school. But on the persuasion of Adi Shankaracharya, Mandan Mishra and the Jagat Guru sit down for a dialogue. And look at the civility of it. Who is the umpire? Mandan Mishra's wife, Ubhay Bharati. Adi Shankaracharya believes in the impartiality of the wife who is his chief opponent. उनकी ही पत्नी को वो अंपायर स्वीकारते हैं. And this dialogue, as I write in my book, continues for days, if not weeks. And in an age when there was no electronic media or social media, in a sense, all of Hindu India is following it. But the process and the instrumentality is dialogue. So therefore, everything is a dialogue. The Upanishads are a dialogue. The Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue. The Brahma Shastra are a dialogue, at least to the extent that the opponent's viewpoint is stated explicitly in the text. What they call opponent. That means the person who opposes, but is included. We are a dialogic civilization, which we seem to be forgetting today. We don't talk with each other, we talk at each other. And if you pursue too far in not agreeing with some people, they call you anti-national, seditious, देशद्रोही. ये तो हमारी परंपरा नहीं. तो मैं सर अरुण कुमार जी, मैं यहां अगर आप कहें तो रुक जाता हूं. And if there are any questions, आप अनम्यूट कर लें अपने को.
नहीं, थोड़ा और इतना आनंद आ रहा है आपको सुनने में, तो थोड़ा
असल में मेरा एक और एंगेजमेंट भी है, तो जैसे आपने कहा था मैं लगभग 40 मिनट तो बोल चुका हूं.
हम तो सुनने के लिए उत्सुक हैं. आपका जितना समय हो आप.
आई एम फाइन. इफ देयर आर क्वेश्चंस आई वुड बी हैप्पी.
हाँ, वो भी बाद में आ जाएंगे, मगर अभी तो आपको सुने. बहुत आप सरल भाषा में इतनी बढ़िया बात बता रहे हैं.
No, what I will do is I will continue to explore and have शास्त्रार्थ. I'll have a शास्त्रार्थ. अगर आप
ठीक है, सवाल कुछ हैं आपसे, आप थोड़ा और जितना चाहें, आप समय आपके पास है.
नहीं तो मैं I will end here by saying that we need to really introspect, in my view, about our knowledge of, and sorry to use that expression, jigyasa about some of our great legacies of refinement. Otherwise, one of the things that I have found is that I am at a literature festival and somebody asked me if Adi Shankara is the same as the Shankaracharyas who are currently heading the 4 mutts in India. तो ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. But I would recommend to you, if you have a library, to get a copy of my book and for your members to glance through it. It's easily explained. One of the things I try to do is to take some of these legacies of the past to the present in a manner which is readable and digestible. So it is Advait explained through the life of Adi Shankaracharya. तुलसीदास रामचरित मानस का निचोड़, क्योंकि पूरी रामायण तो शायद कोई पढ़ेगा नहीं. Similarly, with other books, I have tried to bring parts of our past to the present. And that endeavor should continue. But again, I will say, sir, I'll stop here, and if there are any questions and answers, I'd be happy.
मनीष जी, कोई चैट बॉक्स में प्रश्न हो तो उनको ले लें, और फिर उसके बाद और भी लोग हों. इनके माथुर साहब ने अभी कहा था, उनको सुन लें.
अनम्यूट है सर माइक, अगर कोई क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहे तो एक करके पूछ सकते हैं.
आप लोग
Sir, I would like to ask a question.
पूछे.
Sir, as Sir very well mentioned about the present state of Indian politics, so I wanted to ask him that in this era of divisive and identity politics, how do we infuse this rich cultural, spiritual heritage in the political and decision-making sphere? We are reading books, we know that we have this rich spiritual heritage, but when we see it in a political and decision-making sphere, it is not found there. So how to infuse it, this is spirituality, this thousands of years of knowledge, into decision-making?
अब वो उसके लिए क्रांति चाहिए, कोई मैजिक वॉन्ड तो है नहीं. आप अपना एजुकेशन करिकुलम ही देख लीजिए. I mean, the syllabus has not been changed adequately. आप मैं मिसाल देता हूँ, आर्किटेक्चर के स्कूल में कितने लोग विष्णु धर्मोत्तारा पढ़ते हैं, जिसमें पूरा 150 pages on architecture. How many people read about Vastu Shastra? It's not there. I'm not saying Vastu Shastra is all scientific. So our syllabus has not changed. And in the beginning only I said we become caricatures if we don't know enough about our own heritage. If you know Shakespeare and have not read Kalidas, वो ये colonized societies की एक समस्या है. It takes time for you to reclaim your own past. और शायद इसमें कुछ हद तक अंग्रेजी का भी हस्तक्षेप है. हमारी सारा प्रयास हमारा ये होता है कि अंग्रेजी मीडियम से पढ़ते पढ़ते बाकी जितने मीडियम हैं भूल जाए. मुझे अटल जी की एक दफे उन्होंने कहा था कि ये मिथ्या है कि अंग्रेज इस देश को छोड़ के चले गए स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के वजह से. They left this country because they could not bear anymore the massacre of the English language. छोड़ के चले गए. और हमारे लिए वही एक प्रथम भाषा है. अब क्या है, भाषाएं भी जो है ना, they are not only a means of communication, they are a window you open, और उसके पीछे संस्कृति है. अगर आप स्कूल जाते ही पहली चीज बाबा ब्लैक शीप पढ़ेंगे, मैं अंग्रेजी के खिलाफत नहीं कर रहा, मैं खुद भी अंग्रेजी में लिखता हूँ. मैं सेंट जेवियर, सेंट कोलंबस, इंडिया स्कूल, सेंट स्टीफेंस गया हूं, तो मैं क्या इसके बारे में कह सकता हूँ, पर इस पर हम सबको थोड़ा आत्मचिंतन करने की जरूरत है।
माथुर साहब कुछ पूछना चाह रहे थे, इनके माथुर साहब दिल्ली से।
माथुर साहब।
श्री एन के माथुर साहब का सवाल है सर, आदि शंकराचार्य travels to four corners of India with hardly any transportation at that time. Can such travels be explained by quantum mechanics of today?
Actually, he just walked, and it's not difficult to do it. I calculated that from Kaladi to Ankareshwar, if you walk a certain number of kilometers every day, you should be there, even though you take into account forests and rivers and natural hurdles, within a month. Easily. It's possible. Well, उस वक्त there were no means, so it's not quantum physics where he was transported there. He walked. और मंडली चलती थी, उनके कुछ डिसाइपल्स और वो और साथ, और डेंजर्स बड़े होते थे। मैंने काफी कोशिश की, क्या प्रॉब्लम क्या है, हम अपनी रीसेंट हिस्ट्री को संभाल के नहीं रखते। काशी में मुझे उनका घर नहीं मिला, बड़ी कोशिश की, बहुत से मैंने टेक्सचुअल अकाउंट पढ़े, एनालाइज किया, स्कॉलर से बात की, वो कहाँ रहते थे। फिर मैंने अपनी एक थीसिस दी है कि शायद यहाँ रहते, बट वी डोंट कीप। बट the fact that he walked the length and breadth of this country, outlining its civilizational map within the short age of 32 years when he died, is a remarkable achievement. Nothing short of remarkable.
भानवत साहब का कोई सवाल है?
नमस्कार सर, एक तो पहले तो आपको बधाई सर और धन्यवाद, आभार आपका कि इतनी अच्छी तरह से, बहुत समझ में हर एक को इतना अच्छा लग रहा था, जैसे अरुण कुमार साहब ने कहा चलता ही रहता ऐसा लग रहा है कभी। एक दो छोटे छोटे से सवाल है सर। आपने जिज्ञासा की बात की है, आज जिज्ञासा रखना तो अपराध हो गया जैसे लगता है कभी कभी। अगर सार्वजनिक जीवन की बात करें हम, तो क्या जिज्ञासा रखना अपराध बनता जा रहा है उस देश में जहाँ आदि शंकराचार्य ने इतनी बड़ा कॉन्सेप्ट दिया, जिसको आपने सरलता से समझाने का प्रयास किया। और दूसरा इसी से जुड़ी हुई बात ये, अगर शंकराचार्य, आदि शंकराचार्य के जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, अगर उसको सब लोग इंटरनलाइज कर लिए होते, थियोरेटिकल क्वेश्चन है, अजम्पशन है, कर लिए होते, तो हमारे देशों के बीच में और हमारे देश के अंदर जो अंतर संबंध है वो किस प्रकार के होते हैं? थोड़ा सा इस पे कुछ आप
देखिए,
कहना चाहें।
थैंक यू सर। नहीं, वो जिज्ञासा के अगेंस्ट मैं सोचता हूँ अभी कोई नेशनल लॉ भी आ सकता है। न सवाल पूछिए, न वो सवाल कभी अनकंफर्टेबल होंगे, तो या जिज्ञासा को सेडिशन कह सकते हैं। The point is this, that we were a civilization that set out on a quest to search and push the horizons of knowledge. मैं एक ही केवल फिलॉसफी की नहीं बात कर रहा हूँ, स्पिरिचुअलिटी की नहीं, in many areas. And if you see my next book, I have explored them. Take a concept like rasa. It's a phenomenal concept. What constitutes the aesthetic experience? वो वेस्टर्नर्स कहते हैं 17th सेंचुरी में एक आर्ट क्रिटिक ने वर्ड डिस्क्राइब किया है, इन्वेंट किया है, जिसका नाम है एस्थेटिक्स। अरे, at the turn of the millennium, Bharat in his Natya Shastra, and the Natya Shastra is 6,000 Sanskrit shlokas. There is an entire chapter only on the exploration of what constitutes the aesthetic experience. It is not a compendium of the arts. कि है क्या ये experience, रस. So we push the horizons of thinking. For that you need curiosity and freedom. If you don't have that, फिर क्या होगा? And their second question was, अगर, देखिए एक दफे मैं चेन्नई में इसी पुस्तक पर गोपाल कृष्ण गांधी के साथ वार्तालाप में था, तो वो भी इस बात को कह रहे थे कि साहब, the social inequalities continue to remain in spite of the revolutionary notion of Brahm. तो क्योंकि वो पोते हैं महात्मा गांधी का, मैंने उनसे कहा कि सर, I don't think India or the world has seen such a towering messiah of non-violence like Mahatma Gandhi for centuries. Was he able to eradicate violence? Ironically, he died by a bullet. So between concept and actual practice, but there is a lesson. आज जो हमारे राजनेता जो धर्म के ठेकेदार हैं, अगर छोटे छोटे सीमित कैटेगरीज में बंद हैं थ्रू द कास्ट प्रिज्म, they should actually read the scriptures. पढ़ें तो क्या कहा है उपनिषद में. एंड आदि शंकराचार्य जिसके सामने हर साल उनकी जयंती मनाई जाती है, जब मैंने ये पुस्तक लिखी तो पहली कॉपी मैंने राष्ट्रपति जी को ही भेंट की. एक समारोह हुआ राष्ट्रपति को. तो इन सब चीजों को करने में तो हम काफी सुदृढ़ हैं, पर जो उनका एसेंशियल संदेश है वो भी तो समझे.
एक का अगर कोई और प्रश्न हो तो आई वांटेड टू आस्क कि जो निर्गुण ब्रह्मन का कॉन्सेप्ट है और जो आदि शंकराचार्य की फिलॉसफी है या हिंदुइज्म का जो प्लूरलिज्म है, these are all concepts which are somewhat remote from the masses. And karma kand, the rituals, puja, worship of several gods, these appeal to them. And all this is reinforced by social media today, the messaging from political leaders. How do we then hope ever to reclaim the real Hinduism, which is of course plural? There'll be all kinds of schools and thoughts, but the real substance of our civilization.
Because we will reclaim it partly by challenging those who claim it to be their monopoly without knowing enough of it. I have been writing, for instance, I've written on Adi Shankaracharya. You were kind enough to mention Tulsidas, Ramcharitmanas, Chanakya. I have an earlier book which Gulzar Sahab has translated, a book of poems on Yudhishthir and Draupadi. I've written a book on Krishna, which is published by Penguin Books, Krishna the Playful Divine. In other words, you contribute through the limited knowledge you have of what the real Hinduism is. But the real problem is not that there is lack of knowledge of real Hinduism. The real problem is that there is a concerted attempt to project Hinduism only in a certain way, which is actually antithetical to the principles of Hinduism. that has to be fought politically. It's not an easy task, let me assure you. Elections have to be won. Nobody likes to lose elections. But still.
जीके तिवारी साहब का सवाल है सर, प्लीज.
Sir, thanks a lot, sir, for such a wonderful exposition. Sir, I have 3 questions. You may ask as time permits to you, sir. My first question is, there is allegation against Adi Shankaracharya ji that by his teaching, particularly the Mayavad and Brahm Satyam Jagat Mithya, he made Indians indolent and lethargic and indifferent to the worldly developments. And that made us vulnerable and easy targets for the invaders to loot us, plunder us, exploit us. How far this allegation is true? Second question, my sir. Shankaracharya ji, of course, wonderful. 32 years he was no more. And he studied Upanishad and propounded the philosophy of Advaitavad. The same Upanishad were studied by the Madhvacharya, another personality, and he says Dvait Advait. The same Upanishad was studied in depth by Ramanujacharya, and he propounded Vishishtadvait. Now, who to trust? What is ultimately what Upanishad is? And third, my question is, sir, there is allegation that Shankaracharya ji is a Prachanna Buddha. He is a hidden Buddhist. Sir, as time permits to you, sir, you may kindly like to answer.
Yeah, very, very relevant question. I'll try to answer them because unfortunately, Arun Kumar sir, I have to leave in about 6-7 minutes. I have another engagement, and but I will answer them because they're very interesting questions. First of all, the notion of lethargy and its conflation with Maya. It's a very wrong conflation. I say this with humility. Actually, Maya is Shakti. Shiv is Chitta Swarup. Parvati is the Shakti of Shiv in the form of Maya in many representations of Hindu mythology. Maya is a goddess. In Sankhya and Yoga, the Purush is pure consciousness. The Prakriti is what creates Srishti, which in Advait is Maya, or the illusion of Srishti from that undifferentiated consciousness. It's full of energy. So, first of all, the notion that there is destiny and fate which is over has nothing to do with Shankaracharya. ये तो एक पुराना गाना भी है, के सरा सरा whatever shall be, तो हम क्या करें? अब उनको तो नहीं है मैं कह सकता कि मायावाद में फंसे. ये तो ह्यूमन टेंडेंसी है. हाँ, ये जरूर है, माया है, सब माया है, which is in an extremely interesting state. It is the percolation to the ordinary psyche of the essential truth of Maya that what you see is Maya but not real. It's all passing phenomena like a mirage. That is exactly what Shankaracharya said. Maya hai, sab Maya hai bhaiya. Ye to aayega aur jayega. Khair, that part. Upanishads and the many schools of Advaita. You see, Advait, as propounded by Adi Shankaracharya, becomes exceptionally dry. This acceptance, which has never been challenged, of an attributeless Nirguna Brahm does not fulfill the desire in human beings कि यार कोई तो जगह हो जहां मैं जा करके मत्था टेकूं. I'm simplifying this, please excuse me for it. I've done a lot of work on Ramanuja. So what Ramanuja did, that without denying the supremacy of Brahma, he came up with the Vishisht Advaita doctrine, which allows for a personal God, Ishwar, without negating the non-dualism of Advaita. कि ब्रह्म तो खैर अल्टीमेट है, उनके इनकारनेशन परमिसिबल है ईश्वर में. ईश्वर वो है जिनके पास हम जा करके पूजा कर सकते हैं, भक्ति प्रपत्ति से जा सकते हैं, कुछ चाहिए तो मांग सकते हैं. एंड देन केम निम्बारकर, Chaitanya, Shuddha Advait, Advait Advait, etc., which were all essentially the movement from the dry notion of Nirgun Brahm to opening the Vaishnav doors of personal God and Bhakti. So it has to be understood in that context. It's not that there are different interpretations, but that they are accommodating human aspirations. On the question of Prachanna Buddhist, I tend to agree with you. What does Buddha say? What is Nirvana? When you cease to exist, as you are so constituted. Nirvana. Buddha says that all of reality is kshanikvad. It comes and it goes in 1 second. You can't step into the same river twice. It has moved on. And actually, this corresponds also very well with quantum physics. The tremendous flux. So, Adi Shankaracharya's devaluation of external reality and Buddhism's devaluation of external reality have similarities. Ultimately, the difference between Buddhism and Hinduism, as propounded by Adi Shankaracharya also, Buddhism का बीज word है दुख, sorrow and the way out of sorrow. Basically, आप समझिए. बुद्धा से मुझे मेटाफिजिकल क्वेश्चन में मत फंसाओ. इस दुनिया में दुख है, दुख का निवारण है. The eightfold path, the four truths and the eightfold path, and ultimately the only emancipation is way out of self. और वेदांत क्या कहते हैं? हिंदुइज्म में कहते हैं बीज वर्ड है आनंद. दुख नहीं, आनंद. That we are Anand, we were of Anand, we will be Anand, and ultimately it is Chidananda Rupa. ये फर्क है सच. But in their empirical analysis and philosophy, there are similarities between Shankaracharya and Buddhism. It's bound to be Buddhism was an offshoot of Hinduism.
बहुत आपने सुंदर ढंग से सबको उनके प्रश्नों का निवारण कर दिया. बहुत आपको धन्यवाद है. और मैं बिस्सा जी से निवेदन करूंगा कि आपको फॉर्मल थैंक्स दें. आपका नहीं आपने इतने अपने अमूल्य समय में से हमको समय दिया. बहुत आपके आभारी.
It was a pleasure.
बिस्सा जी.